Why don't we jump right into the big topic? I mean, who in the gamosphere is not amped about Starfield right now?
Who in the gamosphere is not amped right now?
Who is even watching the WAN show right now instead of playing Starfield?
Of people saying like, "Hey, just checking in, but I can't really keep watching because there's too much dialogue in Starfield. See you later."
Can you explain something to me?
Yeah.
How is it that you already have like 6 hours logged?
Well,
because I have personally spent like most of your waking hours with you since the game launched. Can you explain this to me?
Well, I was at your house until like 6.
Uh-huh.
And then I went home and played until like midnight.
I see.
And then I went to sleep.
And then I saw you this morning.
And we played more Stars.
And we played more Starfield. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Why don't we run through what's in our notes here, and then we'll talk a little bit about Luke's experience and also my experience. I got stuck in a ship already.
That was actually cool.
That took me way longer in Star Citizen.
Yes.
Bethesda's Starfield is available through early access and is set to come out more generally on Wednesday, September the 6th. Reviews are already out and are generally positive, though some community discourse has been centered around comparisons to No Man's Sky, Star Citizen, as well as other Bethesda games, and hasn't been especially positive.
And like Mass Effect and tons of things.
One particular pain point was the fact that players cannot walk the circumference of Starfield's 1,000 planets. How dare they? I mean, you can land anywhere on a planet, but outside of pre-established sites like cities, the game mixes procedurally generated and handcrafted elements to create a limited area that you can explore on foot, which by some reports is actually bigger than the entire map of Fallout 4. So this complaint
I don't care about this
little bit
literally
spurious.
At all.
Spurious? Yeah.
If you want to spend actually hours walking in a particular direction, finding nothing, like, okay.
I think if there's anything that gamers have proven over the years, it's that they will.
Someone's going to want to do that.
They do want to.
But there's very likely, in my opinion, going to be some mod that allows you to do it anyways. Also, you could walk up to a certain point and then like just get in your ship and move it and then just keep walking if you wanted. You could circumnavigate a planet by just moving your ship a bunch of times.
A slightly more legitimate criticism concerns the in-game map, particularly in cities. And I have a link here. It apparently looks like this. Oh, that is very unfortunate.
I will fully admit the map totally is terrible. I will also, however, say that the planet, this is the planet side map.
Yeah.
When you're in the like space view, solar system view, etc., that's all good. The like planet side terrestrial map is kind of trash. I think someone's probably going to change this at some point, but I don't know. I didn't really use it, so I didn't really care.
Can I just? It's one of those things though that it's just kind of confusing to me.
Like, why is it so bad? Because the Skyrim map was fantastic.
Morrowind came out in 2002. I would guess you've played Morrowind. I have only dropped into it once, and I didn't last very long because I tried to play it after playing Oblivion. And
it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Anyway, I would guess that the map was actually better.
Oh yeah.
Than this.
Yeah.
So how is it? And we saw a lot of stuff like that when we were tinkering around with it this morning. How is it that you can have been making games where you explore and use maps for 20 years and then release a map like that? Like, I just don't really, it had to be intentional.
Yeah, I will say, like when I landed in whatever the main city's called, what is it called again? Dan?
Dan's trying.
New Atlantis?
New Atlantis. When I landed in New Atlantis, which is like the big primary main city, I was unsure of where to go to find a place that I could sell my firearms to, because I was carrying too many firearms and I wanted to sell them.
What a problem.
So I didn't open my map. I don't know why.
I can tell you weren't in America.
Actually, it's the store is in the residential district, and I made a joke about how it feels like it's America. Sorry. Anyways, I saw there was an info kiosk. I didn't open my map. There was an info kiosk, and I was like, oh, I wonder if like this works. And I open it, and it tells me what thing it's in, like what area it's in. And I just went to the tram thing, and the tram said I could go there. So I went there, and then I just found it myself. And it felt very intuitive. It felt intuitive to the point where I didn't even really think of opening the map. I was just like, oh, I'm just going to do it this way. So yes, the map is bad and it should be better. And I hope modders make it better. But I will say that they've done other things in the game that are cool to the point where you don't really need to use it that much. You can also fast travel not using the map. You have this thing called the scanner, and you can bring it up and it'll show you points of interest, and you can fast travel to those points of interest on foot and in your ship. A lot of people complain about needing to open up, including myself, about needing to open up the map to fast travel when you're in your ship because it feels very non-immersive. But I learned today, I haven't been able to put it into action yet, but I learned today that you don't actually have to do that. You turn on your scanner and then you can warp there. Riley's calling him Bethesda simp. That's true, but I think I'm being fairly unbalanced here. I'm saying the map is trash. What I'm also saying is that there's ways around it.
Is that you don't really need the map anyway.
It's true.
The
map is trash, though.
You are
and the Skyrim map was sick.
You are kind of sounding like an apologist right now.
For what?
It's
I said it's trash.
Where's the city map?
Yeah.
Where's the city map?
It's bad!
Where's the city
I never
map?
said it's good!
Why
They
do you
should
like
have
it so
one.
much?
The iPhone reception is bad, but if you just held it differently, then you wouldn't
You're
be a
using
problem.
it wrong.
He doesn't like it, but he has nothing.
It's because it's fair.
All right.
I'm just saying, like, if you are playing, there are ways that you can avoid it because it is so bad that you should probably like not use it. Because it's actually like, I thought it was a bug. Someone first sent me that the map was this bad, and I was like, yeah, there's no way. That's got to just be like, it's not loaded in properly, or like something's just wrong. Like, I don't really believe it. And then I saw it in the game myself, and I was like, holy crap, they're not kidding. Because like, the like solar system map is fantastic. So I don't know. I don't know why it's so bad.
Overall, the game seems to be running on NVIDIA and AMD graphics cards outside of some minor issues. The notes here say, Linus can probably speak to this, having filmed a video today. Yeah, we both can. We were both there. We'll talk about this in a bit. But according to Reddit, on Intel Arc GPUs, most of the time the game doesn't even launch. And this is a great video from HughSplat. I'm not going to show you the whole thing because, fair use, right? I don't want you guys to watch the whole thing. I want you to go check out the video. It has 368 views, but it's amazing. Arc A770 no worky. Check this out. It apparently looks like that when it does manage to launch. Yeah. I'm going to drop the link in the chat so you guys can go check that out. It's only about a 30-second clip, so it's not going to take you very long. Right, the YouTube chat as well. I forgot about YouTube chat. Sorry, YouTube chat. I remember you. I was trying to think of what you would say to your forgotten child. It's just, so that they're not forgotten.
I was getting milk.
And cigarettes from the corner store. Anywho, Intel has acknowledged the issue on Twitter, says that they are working to improve the experience for the game's general release next week. And meanwhile, AMD released their Starfield optimized driver on October 31st, while NVIDIA released their driver a week earlier on August 22nd. Did I say October? Did I say October? It doesn't matter.
You might have. I'll give us a little spoiler alert here too, because I've been retesting the 7900 XTX for the AMD video because I'm trying to get more recent testing, and I launched the game and it crashed pretty quickly, and I was like, oh no, and then realized that I didn't have the day one driver. Got the day one driver, perfect after that. Zero performance issues, zero crashes, no problems. So it was a very good experience, and it's on me for not updating. So. Not their problem.
Now, we tried 3 different configurations today. Aside from Luke's at-home config with the 7900 XT, we tried a 5700, so Radeon 5700, which happens to be the minimum spec that Bethesda advertises as what can have, I guess, a suitably adequate experience running the game.
You can play the game this way.
I've never really understood what minimum spec means.
Because you can always launch it with slightly more minimum than what the minimum spec is.
Yeah. Anyway, so we tried that. We tried their recommended spec, which is an RTX 2080 non-super, if I recall correctly. And then we also got just a ballin' out, absolutely everything, top of the line config. And I think... Man, I don't want to say too much because it's a good video. It's worth watching. We encountered a ton of sort of interesting behavior, both in terms of like graphical anomalies or things that we can discuss, and in terms of just like general game behavior.
And there's an interesting discussion in it about the current state of like PC graphics options. Because we're in an interesting spot because there's a lot of graphics option settings which, when enabled, enable a bunch of automated stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's a black box.
I don't really know what's happening.
Exactly. So
you might get...
Here, let's put it this way. The minimum config and the recommended config, just out of the box, ran at almost the same FPS. However, it was very noticeable to the eye that one of them looked better than the other, but we had no way of knowing exactly what settings in the background.
To be clear, when he's talking minimum recommended config, he means the hardware config. The settings are the same on both in this scenario.
No, not necessarily.
But so we did that. We did the same
that's
settings
true.
on
we
both.
We did do that, yes.
And it was graphically better on the higher end one with very similar frame rates.
Yes.
Interesting.
So the reason for that is there's so much automatic fidelity tuning going on in the game that
if you turn on certain settings,
you can't tell necessarily, and those are settings that are enabled by default.
And you probably should turn on.
That you can't tell exactly what you're running at. Like, it doesn't have a drop down for texture quality. What?
Yeah.
When's the last time? I mean, I shouldn't even ask this because there's a lot of console ports that are...
It's going to be an example right away.
There's going to be an example right away. But my point is,
yesterday.
When's the last time that we should have seen a PC game that doesn't have a texture quality slider?
Yeah. It's weird.
How is that even remotely acceptable?
There's already modders fixing some of that stuff. Like there's modders in Starfield that have added FOV control. Because did you notice there isn't an FOV slider option?
I didn't even notice that.
Interesting to have a first-person game with no FOV slider.
Least of my concerns, sir.
Yeah.
When I saw the fact that there's no texture slider...
I don't even think we should talk about the other one.
What, draw distance?
No.
There's no draw distance slider.
The one thing that you can't change that we were enraged about. I feel like that should be a tidbit for the video.
No, let's talk about... There's so much in the video.
Okay.
You can't set a non-native resolution.
So if you have a 4K monitor, this is a very hard to run game. If you have a 4K monitor and you're like, I'd run this game in 1440p.
Or 1080.
You have to do like resolution percentage, whatever it's called.
Scaling.
You have to do resolution scaling. But when you do that, the other settings are going to interact differently. So like we actually got a very different experience instead of doing a resolution scaling by changing our monitor's resolution, setting it to native, cranking resolution scaling to 100%, and then interacting with other options. It was actually notably different.
Hold on, I should clarify that a little bit. So by setting it to a non-native desktop resolution. So we've got a 4K TV. If we run it at 4K, but then set the resolution scaling to 50%, which is the minimum, that's as low as the slider in-game goes. Remember, we don't have any mods installed. We're not... we were experiencing it as a gamer would experience it. We're not running into, config files or anything like that and manually typing in values. We're just using it as it's meant to be used. So 50% is the lowest you can go, meaning that you are rendering at 1080p and then, but like FSR is enabled. So maybe like you actually have no idea what resolution, like what pixel count your GPU is trying to push. And then, sorry, what Luke was saying was we tried changing the desktop resolution to 1080p. So that's not the native resolution of the panel. Now we go into the game and all of a sudden we can turn it down to 50% again, which would be 540p. Except that depending on what desktop resolution you're running, except that no matter what desktop resolution you're running at, when you just go to low, medium, and high, it just moves that slider to, what was it, like 62%,
I think so.
50%, or 75%. It actually, even on Ultra, never goes to 100%. We didn't even mention that in the video, but that blew my mind.
I think we pointed it out.
Did
I don't
we?
know if
Okay.
it was a major beat, but we
It
pointed it out.
never defaults to 100%. So what that means is it's setting this overall level of detail the same regardless of what pixel count your display is running at. How is that even possible that they overlooked that? I don't understand it.
It's kind of wild. You also can't full screen.
So if you're at 1080p for your desktop resolution and you put it at low, it's going to render at 50% of 1080p with all low details. If you have a 4K monitor, okay, and you set it to low, you are going to render at 1080p all low details. Whoops. Those are not the same low.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's honestly really weird.
The whole like only working in windowed full screen though and having to use like resolution scaling, I know that's not a new thing. That's not unique to this game.
It's just
The implementation is jank, and it's bad and I hate it. But that's a separate thing. Like it's Halo Infinite has the same thing too. You can't just run an exclusive full screen mode. But the implementation in Starfield and the way that the presets interact with it is really, really bad because people have the same hardware. They're going to set it at the same thing in game, and then depending on what monitor they have, them and their friend might have very, very different gameplay experiences. That's bad. Not being able to just set an exact pixel count that you are rendering at, and then an exact target pixel count that you are trying to upscale to, means that you just have no idea what's going on inside the black box of this engine. Just wild, man. Definitely some fun bugs. I really like the one where dead guys stand like this.
Oh yeah, it holsters their weapon, so there is nothing here. So that no, their hands are up.
Oh yeah, right. Okay.
But their weapon just goes in their holster and they stand there, and they're lootable. But they just keep doing this. So you're looking around and you keep getting jump scared by this by this thing. I waste a ton of ammo on them because I every time I'll come around the corner, I'm like and I shoot. I'm like crap.
Yeah, but I mean, that might
done.
be a you thing. You couldn't even recognize friendlies from enemies.
Oh my goodness. I was roasting him for that, and then I did it too.
It's a very gray-brown.
I have an excuse. My eyes are bad.
I mean, I know this is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
He was roasting the game for being very like shades of gray and brown. But we were on a moon, so it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I've been on colorful planets. There are also, and again, this isn't defending Bethesda, but there's reshade mods already out. There's multiple of them.
0 Point in Float Plane says I had the opposite. Some miner was lying dead on the floor, but had his eyes open and was talking.
I think that's worse.
Yeah,
that's a lot worse. Oh boy.
I mean, zombies are normalized enough in games that it's like, I don't mind the living dead, but the dead living.
Space zombies are worse.
That's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Are we talking about Star Citizen? No, we're not.
No, but in a weird way, this made me appreciate Star Citizen a little bit more.
Really?
Because
that is, for a game that you just spent probably a solid, I don't know, 75% of the pre-show and like half of this show being positive about, that is a really mean thing to say.
See, we haven't had the opportunities. I have a lot of negative things I can say about Starfield. I've talked to you, but I hate the crouching. And you pointed out that like maybe it's a little more realistic. I don't care.
Yeah.
It feels like junk.
Okay.
It feels very bad to me.
It's not very like Quakey, you know? Like it's not like press control and they're just like, I am faster than gravity. You know, like it's not like that. Like it's like press, you know, like it takes them a split second to get down. But
here's
my Tarkov.
Here's
How
my
is this
issue.
a problem for you? It takes like 8 minutes to get to prone.
It actually feels more responsive in Tarkov. One of the things in Tarkov that I would say is it initiates faster. And one of my big problems is if I'm in a firefight and I'm like, I'm getting shot at, I need to be behind this physical cover. My character's like, I'll get to it. Like, no, dude. Get down. And there's maybe some argument for like crouching when you're actively moving taking longer, and I think Tarkov does do that now that they have the momentum system in place. But it feels really, really clunky, and I don't like it.
I 100% think this is just a modern gaming thing, and you're going to have to deal with it.
Here's something that isn't a modern gaming thing: is the sheer volume of loading screens, and the places that the loading screens even happen in. Like there was the firearms store, like I mentioned earlier. It's a very, very small shop with one shopkeeper. You have to loading screen in and loading screen out. It loads this enormous city around it. Just let me open the door. Don't put a loading screen. What are we doing?
Yeah, I mean...
Why do you have to loading screen into your ship? The inside of the ship is tiny.
Remember when we all watched that PlayStation 5 showcase where they talked about, new generation, you're streaming data off of high-speed SSDs and all that stuff. I know that that's a Sony thing, and architecturally they are probably ahead of what Microsoft is doing on the Xbox right now, but the sheer speed of the SSDs is different, but not so different that I would imagine that what you're talking about should be a problem. As you get close to something, I don't actually understand why it couldn't start to grab those assets.
And some people are backing me up. Night Pause in Philippine chat said crouch and flashlight. I noticed this too. Both make me feel like your character has severe arthritis. There's already mods that reduce the input latency when you go to carry objects in game. So if you go to like, I'm picking this up and I want to move it and put it somewhere else, there are already mods that reduce the input latency on that because it's like super high for like no real reason. There's a bunch of weird sluggish controls where you go to do something, you press the button, there's a noticeable amount of time that goes by for like no reason, and then it starts to happen. And it's just like, it doesn't make it more immersive for me. It doesn't make it better. I hate it.
I wonder if part of
Excited for mods to solve that.
I wonder if part of it is that people are generally used to running games at really high frame rates, and Starfield does not. Like both of the recommended systems, they were clearly with the recommended settings on these recommended configs, clearly targeting 30 frames per second, like 26 to 28 1% lows, 30 to 33 average kind of thing. And I do wonder if a lot of PC gamers in particular are playing this 30 FPS game and kind of going, man, it feels like there's an extra like 17 milliseconds on top of everything I'm trying to do. Now, that doesn't explain your issue with the crouch or the flashlight.
It's not everything.
And I think that that's probably part of it. But I do wonder if these things are compounding a little bit and making it feel more worser than it actually is.
Potentially.
Because we talked about this a little bit when we were at the shoot. It's not part of the video, but we were talking about how this year it feels like there's been huge game after huge game.
Oh, it's been amazing.
And it's just like kind of happening. And we had some different theories. I think one of the theories was
I said
COVID games.
COVID era games, yeah.
And then one of the other theories was, maybe this is just what the development cycle looks like for a new generation console now. Like,
I think that's a good one.
I think people have talked a lot about how the Xbox has lost this generation. The PlayStation 5, it ran away with it, whatever else. But what I kind of wonder is if, forget about the hardware, on the software side, Sony just did a way, way better job of filling up the queue with games that were, if not next gen, at least post last gen enough that they could make the PlayStation 5 give the PlayStation 5 hardware enough of a library of next gen content that it just seems like the obvious winner today. But if it's not, maybe not over.
Well, something that I would argue is I don't think it's
is the flood coming for the Xbox.
I don't know about that. I think my argument is more that I actually, now that I think about it more, I don't think it's a console generation thing, because what I'm noticing is game quality. And like games that I'm going to include personally for this, like, hey, games have been amazing lately, are like Dave the Diver and Sea of Stars, which have nothing to do with
That's true.
fantastic next gen hardware.
Yep.
I also think like the reasons why I just adore Baldur's Gate 3, which is just a stunningly amazing game, have nothing to do with the graphically. I think it's very similar to Divinity Original Sin 2, which is the previous game that they made. I think it's the same engine. I think it's a lot of the same stuff. I don't think that's because of console generation. Starfield, for how hard it is to run, not a particularly amazing looking game.
Let me clarify my console generation point, though.
Okay.
Because I don't necessarily mean that those games, it's kind of like what I was saying with the PlayStation thing. I don't necessarily mean that those games are taking full advantage of this console generation. What I'm saying is that what I suspect is that the development cycle for these games couldn't start until the development kits hit for this generation of consoles. And we're at the point now where, what was the budget for Starfield? I think I saw people throwing around the $600 million number. Like earlier in the chat. That is the only citation I have for that. But I guarantee you it was many, many millions of dollars.
Final estimate based on some forum post on NeoGAF is $400 million.
Okay, and yeah, so the point is many, many millions of dollars. And you were talking about how even playing the game, there are moments where you can clearly see that they worked on this asset like 3 years ago.
It really feels like that. In my experience, I've seen like the fidelity and quality of different assets are surprisingly different across the board.
So that's going to be a number of things. That's going to be, you're going to have very different teams working on things, and they could be working on them at very, very different times. And so we know, okay, yeah, they've obviously been working on this game since around the time the Xbox Series X would have been beginning its life cycle. And so I do wonder if it's just that the games that are getting the time, whether that goes into more graphical fidelity or whether it goes into, so I'm not going to say something like a Dave the Diver probably has anything to do with this sort of this cycle here. But I do think that it's probably, it's probably a combination of a lot of factors. It's probably partly the generational cycle. It's probably partly just the COVID return to productivity boom, projects kind of got stalled for a little bit and maybe we're seeing maybe it was even just, everything got kind of disrupted and we had some kind of cool ideas.
Oh, I'm not talking about it being disrupted. I mean there's certain, especially online continuous service games, we saw quality increases from COVID era. During COVID era,
right?
Because these are games that have to roll out content constantly. I think some of the work from home stuff that happened in the gaming industry was super beneficial. I'm sure it was also super negative for certain companies that didn't manage it well or whatever. I'm not saying across the board it's good, to be very clear.
Yeah,
but there are some examples where it's worked really well.
If you are 100% for work from home or you are 100% against work from home, you're wrong.
I think there's flaws with those.
Yeah, the world is almost never black and white, and it can be really, really good, and it can also be really, really bad.
Here's another. I'm jumping off this topic. Here's another criticism that I would have for Starfield.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about EVE Online. When did EVE Online come out? Did EVE Online come out? May 6, 2003. A space game made in May 6, 2003, in my strong opinion, has drastically better travel mechanics than Starfield. When you jump...
They've been working on that game since 2003.
No, when it launched.
Okay, all right.
Because it hasn't changed. When you jump, if you're jumping to a gate in EVE, your ship aligns. This part isn't that important, but it aligns. It points at the things it needs to jump to. And then it kind of starts jumping, and then depending on how far away the thing is, you have to sit in warp and you actually physically move from location to location, right? In Starfield, it's just an animation and then you're done. That doesn't translate a sense of distance or effort or time or anything like that. And I understand there's different explanations. In EVE, you're going up to a extremely high speed and then traveling the whole way. In this one, they maybe I haven't read all the lore yet. Maybe they're doing like we're folding space or something like that. So there is no actual time aspect.
Also, in Eve, when you're in that warp, you can actually get pulled out of it midway through.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Some
there
of the
could
more
be-
advanced stuff, you want to be going to special midway points through a solar system instead of gate to gate, because people hide in that traditional warp highway and they can pull you out right in the middle.
Yeah, they can put a bubble that disrupts warp along the way.
Exactly.
But again, this mechanic might work differently. It might be folding space or whatever. But if it does that, I feel like they should translate it in a different way. Just making it an animation, a loading screen, effectively,
Yeah.
feels,
It's immersion breaking.
yes.
By the way, I think Floatplane Chat is trying to interpret things that we say as uncharitably as possible now.
Oh, boy.
COVID was the best thing to happen to gaming ever. Luke Lafreniere, 2023-0901.
No. There's some games where I think it benefited the game.
There it is. There it is, you guys. You heard it again.
That's all I'm saying is there's some games I think it benefited the game. I also have a weird theory that it has to do with like if the development studio for this game was in a city where people have to commute
Luke
for like
2023, the blood
extremely-
sacrifice was worth it.
extremely
So
long-
that I could get better games.
Oh God, no, I'm not saying that. If people had to commute for very, very long periods of time to get into like a very densely populated city
Yes.
to get to their office, so now they're not burning 3 hours a day,
Yeah.
4 hours a day. I know someone who worked at a game development studio that had to commute over an hour to get in and out both directions, so they're commuting for more than 2 hours a day. If you take that out of their day, they might have more creative energy.
Can we talk about how this is just something that I've never understood. I know I think you and I have probably talked about this at the earliest point, like as much as probably like 13, 14 years ago. I think I was ranting about hockey games. And I was trying to figure out.
We've had rant conversations about hockey games for sure.
Yeah, but we're Canadian, so basically it's a given, right? I was trying to figure out why they keep trying to pack stadiums and like major venues into downtown Vancouver, which if you look at a map, the downtown area of Vancouver is almost an island. It's not an island, it's more of like a peninsula, but it's this tiny, tiny little space with very few points of ingress. And so anytime there's any kind of event, I'm glad Taylor Swift isn't coming. Oh boy. Now I've gotten myself into real trouble.
COVID was good for gaming. I hate Taylor Swift.
Yeah, and we're done. See you later.
Good night, everyone.
Oh boy.
Because every time a major event takes place in Vancouver, it's impossible to get in or out for a solid like 6 hours. And so I remember talking to you. I was like, why are we doing this? Why don't we just put the arena in a suburb where they can just have a giant parking lot where it doesn't cost $40 to park or whatever else, and it doesn't matter, and it also happens to be just as long of a trans, like it's just as connected to transit as the downtown core, but we keep doing this. And I remember when we first started LMG, I got some advice from someone whose advice I respect a lot in general, but in this case, I think they were just completely wrong, where they basically said, yeah, if you're going to be taken seriously, you need to have an office downtown, like a studio downtown. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. We upload videos to the internet. I could have a studio in a barn. And as long as it was decorated kind of nicely, you guys might even like it better. Look at the way people talk about missing the kitchen.
Isn't Mr. Beast stuff like far away from downtown centers?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No one judges that.
Mind you,
don't think.
there are challenges. Like,
sure.
There's a lot of people who just simply do not want to live outside of a city.
But there's also people that don't want to live in a city. So like, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's always going to be a blade that cuts both ways, right? Like
I'd prefer to not live in a city, personally.
Well, yeah, but you are how do I put this? Pragmatic to a fault.
If it costs the same, I don't think I would want to live in a city. I'll word it that way.
It doesn't cost the same. It costs more to live in the city.
No, but what I'm saying is like, come on. He's just trying to bother me.
It's basically all I've done since the pre-show started. It's been kind of It's been kind of a long week. I was supposed to be off. I was actually supposed to be off last week too, but I was supposed to be off this week, and I managed to get 1.25 days off. And the days that I did work, which was most of them, were incredibly intense. We've got a lot of new stuff going on. We've got a lot of pressure from the community, rightly, to make sure that, everything's polished, everything's, awesome. And so there's been a lot going on, and it's been an incredibly challenging day. So I'm bothering Luke.
So Natano in Floatplane chat said, you also assume you'll have good transit. Having everyone heading in the same way when an event ends is just as bad. Hold on.
I have such a good answer to this.
Did it? His point about Vancouver is that everyone has to head in the same way. If it's out in the suburbs, it's more centralized, and there's multiple directions people could head in.
Hub and spoke.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the entire point.
Instead of the arc of possible directions being like this V between my fingers, it's a whole circle.
Yeah. And you know what I honestly think it is? I think a big part of it is that, and I'm going to be generalizing right now based on my own anecdotal experiences, so don't take it personally, but it tends, my experience is that suburb people tend to be a lot more willing to travel for things than city people, because they're just kind of used to it. It's kind of like the same way that Canadians are more accustomed to shopping in US dollars than Americans are to trying to convert their currency to anything. Yeah. Like, you have conversations with Americans and you're like, yeah, well, why don't we just travel there? And they're like, I don't have a passport. And you're like, why don't you have a passport? Like,
everywhere I want to travel is here.
Pretty much, yeah. Every Canadian I know has a passport.
It's a given.
Whereas in America, it seems like it's kind of normal to just not have a passport. What would I need a passport for?
Yeah, but also every Canadian is within like half an hour of the border.
That's true.
If you look at the percentage of the Canadian population that lives within, I think it's 2 hours of the border or something. It's like 90%.
Yeah, this is true. But like, so it's all kind of what's normal to you, right? So I tend to find that suburb people are willing to cross bridges and cross boundaries, and city people have a much lower willingness. Like, their lifestyle just doesn't account for that. See, I grew up where
I think part of it's city taxes funding.
I think it was about an 18-minute drive to the nearest place where you could get a jug of milk. So for me, it's like, yeah, I have to drive half an hour to somewhere. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, and
pretty normal.
Whereas, okay, for the badminton center, for example, like, a lot of my badminton buddies are like Richmond, Vancouver dwellers. And I was like, yeah, well, it's about 33 minutes or something for you. And they're like, yeah, I don't know. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I get it. I get it.
So I think part of it is taxes funding. I read up a while ago on stadiums and how a lot of them don't even really make money. Yeah. And a lot of it's just like,
oh man, if you want to go
by the cities,
if you want to go down like a painful like corruption back alley deal rabbit hole, just look into any publicly subsidized stadium deal.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah.
Man, the chats are like, I don't remember the last time I saw them this active about something that is basically not even what we're talking about anymore. Talking about passports.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I have no passport, gang. Like, what? Why do you have a passport? It's one of those things that just seems to split people right down the middle. Everyone I know is super opinionated about it. The people that I know that have a passport are like, how on earth how could you possibly function without a passport?
For me,
it's your secondary ID if you ever lose your wallet. Yeah. It enables you to travel internationally if you really, flippin' needed to, whatever. And then everyone that I have ever encountered who doesn't have a passport is like, yeah, and?
What do you mean?
What would I need one of those for?
Yeah.
Just like, there doesn't appear to be a lot of middle ground.
The first person I ran into that was like that, I actually sat down and was like, hey, I need to have a conversation with you to just understand, because it seemed so foreign to me. But I think if you live, I've lived within 30 minutes or less from a border my entire life. If that's not your situation,
Yeah.
it's probably going to be different.
Yeah, 100%.
What if you're in your 30s and you've literally never had a reason to have one? Why would you keep paying to renew it?
I mean,
Sure. I don't know. Yeah. I use passports to get on domestic flights even because it just feels weird not using them.
Yeah, it's like...
But you don't have to.
You travel.
Yeah.
You get your passport.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a...
What do you mean? I remember someone was with me. We were going to Toronto for work. And they didn't bring their passport, and I was like worried they weren't going to let them on the plane. And they're like, "No, it's a domestic flight. We're not changing countries." And I'm like, "But we're getting on a plane."
Like it's routine. Like when we're driving to the airport, it's like passport checks, and everyone like makes sure they have their passport.
Yeah, like you have to have it when you go to the airport, right? Come on. Anyways, gaming has been insane lately. I could.
Oh man, they're not stopping. They're just
Gaming has been wild lately. I have more criticisms for Starfield. I also believe that 90+% of the issues that I've had are solvable by modding. Therefore, it being a Bethesda game means they will almost certainly be solved by modding, which is great. And I feel like I'm getting to the point in Bethesda games now where I'm running into factions and side quest situations that are getting very interesting. So I'm satisfied with the game thus far. Moving on though, games this year have been wild, and I think it took Baldur's Gate 3 coming out for me to fully accept that we are in a fantastic era of gaming. Like genuinely. Baldur's Gate 3 is amazing. Starfield it's definitely interesting. We'll leave it there. Sea of Stars is one of the highest rated games I've seen in a long time.
I'm super excited to play, but I'm not going to play until I finish Chained Echoes, which I'm very close. I'm on the final dungeon, so I'm like ready to pick up Sea of Stars.
He's digging Chained Echoes, which came out. Dave the Diver is super sick. I don't think it was a year ago, but it was last year. Elden Ring came out and just smashed. Completely smashed. Tears of the Kingdom, absolutely fantastic. Did I mention Armored Core already?
No.
Armored Core, incredibly great.
Yeah, I think you were saying earlier that you're at a point right now where for the first time in basically as long as you remember, you have a back queue of games to play, all of which are from like this year.
And all of which
the
are
last 12 months.
Amazing. I can't keep up, which is like frustrating because like I've been waiting for Starfield for, I don't know, 6 years or something, but Baldur's Gate came out and it's an amazing game. And I have to put it down to play Starfield.
You haven't, if you work full time and like have family obligations,
you can't.
I think it's fair to say that there has not been enough time to completionist enjoy Baldur's Gate and now move on to Starfield.
No.
Like when did Baldur's Gate 3 come out?
It was just like a few weeks ago or something. Maybe a month. Things have been a little crazy around here.
At least like Armored Core is short.
Less than
August
a month.
3rd.
And that's a big game. And that is an amazing game.
29 days.
That deserves like replays and deserves thorough playthroughs because like I'm hoping to play again with them soon.
Not even out on every platform yet.
Yeah, like they're still rolling out. They're still launching massive, not DLCs, just updates that are adding like content and fixes to the game. Like the Larian Studios is a fantastic studio that is treating the game extremely well. And it's I don't know what to do. I don't have enough time. I can't play all this stuff. I'm planning on like rotating them a little bit, but that just means I feel like I'm never going to finish. But Baldur's Gate 3 deserves the attention, so I don't want to completely put it down either. But like there's even like things with Baldur's Gate, there's complaints about all these games, right? I'm not saying any of them are perfect. Like in Baldur's Gate, Plouffe brought up something that I think is a really good point, where in tabletop RPGs, like if you walk up to a scenario, if you turn around a corner and there's someone who's has a beam from a house on top of them and they're like trying to get it off of them, and you have to strength check to try to help them pick it up. If this was a tabletop RPG, your strongest character would go do it. But in Baldur's Gate, it's whatever one got around the corner first. And you can't switch. So if it's like your wizard, he's probably going to fail. And like that's kind of unfortunate. But I don't even care.
The game's pass
so good.
Away now.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Basically. Yeah. I'll just spam healing spells on you so you just stay in pain the whole time. No, it's
That's more of a cleric thing.
Yeah. It is actually.
I just thought
true.
I'd point that out.
He's right.
That's not really a wizard thing. magic missile, but curing. Blah.
Oh, magic missile to beam and try to miss you.
Curing missile. Oh, thank you so much.
My ailment was healed, but now I have blunt force trauma. Yeah, no, Baldur's Gate is incredible. All these games, there's more that I forgot to mention. It's just been it's been a wild ride, and I think it's good to recognize when we're in these times, because when you look back on it later and you're like, man, games kind of suck right now, but remember that time, that was great. I should have appreciated it more. Like, no, I appreciate it now. These games are awesome. We're in a very, 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 very strong era of gaming, and it's great.